Laura, am I seeing that you'd like to come join me up on our proverbial stage? In general, I want to encourage participants to come up and join the conversation. So I figure the sooner we can set a precedent, the better. Hi. Hi, Laura. Can you?
Hello.
Oh, good. And I can hear you. We're off to a running start with this.
There we go.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Doing great. Really enjoying this conference. Happy to be here.
Yeah,
And
me too.
yeah, yeah. What brings you to this particular session? If you just want to introduce yourself a little, start us off
Yeah, so
informally.
I'm a parent of three boys, 11, 8, and 4, and I'm an investor in Higher Ground and aiming to open an ATI in my hometown, which is
Oh, how exciting! So you've got many good
Mhm.
reasons to be here, and
Yeah,
you're a stakeholder in more ways than one to this in
for
progress
sure.
beta coaching program. So really excited to have you here and to get your feedback, input, any thoughts that you've got on how we can co-create this together, because as you'll see, it's very much a work in progress, and really, really excited for what we're building.
Yeah, well, I think, there's a lot of so much to think about there that is exciting to me, and I feel like anything that you do is bound to be an improvement upon
What
what most
exists.
teens experience. Yeah, or what you or I might have experienced.
Yeah,
It was practically nothing, at least in my case. So uh, it's
ditto.
bound to be an improvement for sure.
That is also very much my starting point, is just seeing
Mhm.
a wide open road to innovate and to just, yeah, at least put some scaffolding in place, right? To begin to chart this new territory that just really hasn't been charted at all, but that could be such a game changer, as obviously,
Mhm.
as I obviously think, but also I think all of us, whether we went through the kind of education and the kind of, well, like you say, lack of coaching, I think we can all relate to some of the challenges of trying to kind of bootstrap ourselves as adults after not really learning a lot of these skills early on. So yeah,
Yeah.
really a lot of work to do, and a lot of impact to be had. So, and I guess
Well,
we're actually in official, yeah, workshop mode. Yeah, go ahead.
I was excited to see your name. I saw your name in the list of speakers before, I think before even the title of the talk, and I knew I was going to be here. So
I really appreciate that, and thrilled to have you here. Thrilled to have all of you here. It looks like we've got 10 of us so far, 11 assembled. If you want to fill out my little poll, just to give us all a sense of what is bringing you personally to this session. And if none of my answer choices really capture it, maybe just feel free to write in the chat kind of what you're particularly hoping to get out of this, the angle that you're coming at this from, whether it's as a parent, as an educator, as a person wanting to learn to be your own Montessori guide and coach, and to apply some of the wisdom and some of the mindsets of Montessori to your own self-coaching. Would love to hear who's here, and hopefully really tailor this session to you guys and to your questions, your backgrounds, because as you'll see, though I've somewhat uh, grandiosely called this, a demo of a new coaching methodology, it's really very much a discussion of a work in progress. And I really do welcome input, and I hope that we can do some co-creating of the approach together. But to give you guys some quick background, so first of all, a quick word or two on who the heck am I and why am I telling you about this new coaching program that I'm developing. So I'm actually a clinical psychologist, and I have been engaged in, you might say, a love affair with Montessori, especially since having both kind of married a Montessori pedagogue, as he calls himself, had a toddler of my own, well, now toddler, and also most recently been given this amazing opportunity to develop a coaching curriculum to support a new and exciting program being developed by ATI, the Academy of Thought and Industry, which is a network of Montessori-inspired middle and high schools that you can learn more about at the ATI booth at this conference. But to give you a little bit of context for the larger program, which I'm not by any means an expert in the details, but what I think to appreciate how the coaching program is actually interfacing with the wider curriculum, I think it's worth just knowing the basic idea, which is that this is a program that integrates a highly flexible, highly customizable curriculum of both content courses and work and applied internship and sort of community engagement opportunities, with one-on-one coaching, which occurs throughout a teen's career at ATI, that functions to support the teen in navigating all that choice and navigating all of that optionality in a way that is mature, responsible, rational, goal-directed, and agential, so that by the time they graduate, they have really learned what they need to learn and developed themselves as a distinct and prepared adult going out into the larger world. So with that said, what I want to tell you guys about is how I see the coaching component functioning to support all the rest of the teen's development, and why I think, and we at ATI think, that it is so important. So as we all here are probably familiar with by now, if we weren't at the start of this conference, Montessori paints an incredibly inspiring picture of the child, right? Of particularly of the healthily developing child in a prepared environment. A calm, serene child attached to reality, who is achieving her elevation through work, whose goals aren't set by her by adults, but by her own drive for self-perfection, which she's independently motivated to achieve through ongoing purposeful contact with reality. The story provides us with loads of guidance on how we as parents, as educators, can activate this kind of confident, self-directed engagement with the world in kids, right? And of course, the main technology by which we do that is through the prepared environment, right? We prepare the environment in a way that is really thoughtfully tailored to that child's current abilities, interests, needs, right? All of which we discover, of course, through careful observation, right? Through loving and detailed observation of the child's feelings, of the child's frustrations, of kind of what is drawing the child's interest and attention at a given point in time. And indeed, this conference is named Discovering the Child, right, in honor of this really deep recognition within the Montessori philosophy, that it's so, so important to understand each child on their own terms, meeting each child where they're at. But at some point, as we know, our children become adults and we don't get to prepare the environment for them anymore, right? They go out into the wider world where they encounter all kinds of hostilities and frustrations and challenges for which they haven't necessarily been thoughtfully prepared by an outsider, right? They encounter authoritarian professors or supervisors, peer pressure. They encounter sometimes downright abuse or ill treatment by partners, by peers, by authority figures, right? And just all of the complexities that we know that they're going to have to navigate as adults building a life in this complicated 21st century we're living in, right? So how on earth are we going to prepare our teens to enter into this wider world where the scaffolding is all removed? So I think adolescence is the critical stage where we've got to foster that transition from the prepared to the unprepared environment and really help teens start to play the role of their own parent and educator and Montessori guide, where before they had an adult kind of thinking on their behalf, what's going on in this child's head? What are they interested in? What are they feeling? How can I help them express these feelings more constructively? Now they've got to learn to do all that for themselves. So the aim of this coaching methodology is to scaffold this process and, in effect, to guide teens to become their own Montessori guides. One way to think about this is that the goal of the coaching program is to make itself obsolete, so that by the time our students graduate, they are doing the coaching for themselves and we can step away. So before I dive into the really, really customizable interactive workshop part, which I really hope to spend the bulk of our time on, I want to just provide some of my thinking on kind of how to understand what we're aiming at in developing this coaching program. Like, what are we shooting for? And I think it helps here to really make explicit to ourselves and then eventually to the student themselves kind of what it is that our prepared environments aim to impart. Like, what is it that we're trying to provide this experiential evidence or data to the child to allow the child to learn for themselves and eventually kind of take in as part of their character as sort of basic understandings, like internalized understandings about themselves and the world. And I've summarized these things in my own words here. And I'm really curious, for the Montessori educators, parents, the real trained Montessorians in the room, I'd actually be really curious how these formulations match up with your own experience and understanding, and with the particular tools and particular principles that you apply day to day. But here's my attempt to distill what I think are 3 core mindsets that if we've done our jobs as Montessori educators, parents, coaches, then the teen, having become a prepared adult, knows these things not just like at an intellectual level where they could recite them, but like knows it in their bones, knows it in their soul, feels it, and by default operates on the premise that these things are true. So to flesh that out a little bit, here are the 3 mindsets that I've identified. So the first is what I would summarize as self-worth, meaning that the student loves and trusts herself, right? Just as we loved and believed in and worked to support and encourage the child in our role as educators, the child now has that same positive, loving disposition toward herself. She knows that she's the ultimate authority on what goals are worth her time to pursue, on what activities are worth her effort to engage in, who to be, who to date, what work to do, what classes to take, kind of full stack, what foods to eat, what politicians to vote for, right? That really, really her judgment and her needs and her values are the ultimate determining criteria for how she lives her life, and that she doesn't need permission to pursue her own happiness and to pursue her own fulfillment and meaning. That's one. Really curious, again, and feel free to write in the chat or to come up on the stage. Looks like actually we have a couple people. I'll just go ahead and bring you guys up so that you can weigh in at any point. Hi, Beth. Hi, Marjorie. Hi, Gabriella. Yay. Okay, good. We're really going to get a conversation going here. With kind of just input on, each of these 3, like, does it resonate? How does it compare to the way that you think about what you're trying to do in the Montessori classroom or setting? So the second one is self-efficacy. Okay, so this kind of sums up a few of the different elements that I think are really core to the Montessori method. Kind of the idea of empowering the child, right, through mastery experiences, through self-directed learning, to really come to love and kind of trust the process of engaging directly with materials and reality and mastering what they want to master, right? So it's kind of both knowing and leaning into the fact that, like, you've got to do the work and that the work isn't just going to happen for you, right? The things aren't just going to magically appear, that you can't just kind of, scream and shout and have your way, but rather that you need to, and that you're capable of doing the work in the world to make the things happen that you really want. And that sometimes there'll be struggle involved, and sometimes things aren't going to go the way you believe, or the way you expect they will, and you're going to have to regroup. And all of that is part of the work. And all of that is part of the growth and part of the learning and part of what it means to really kind of live fully and be an efficacious human being, right? So that's kind of belief number 2. And then belief number 3, which is really at the crux of what the coaching program directly targets. In a way, it's the one that encompasses the other 2. And it's a kind of a meta mindset on top of the other 2, because really it's the belief and the understanding and the willingness to do the work of managing your own mindsets, right? To be your own coach in the way that I've been gesturing at, to shape and direct your own psychology, to do that kind of self-perfecting, self-authoring that Montessori speaks of, largely by being your own curious observer, by being willing to kind of do the work of sometimes changing your own habits, of acknowledging and overriding old, kind of outdated, biased mindsets that are getting in your way of engaging really effectively with, people in your life or with kind of new challenges that are coming up. So these are the 3. So yeah, really love to hear, before we go on to the nuts and bolts, how does this resonate? How does this compare to what you guys think of yourselves as doing as Montessori educators or parents? And maybe what doesn't make sense? How do you like this as an aim for us to be shooting at? So let's see. We've got, oh, this is so exciting. Okay, I'm just going to go in the order that I see you guys kind of lined up in the moderator window. So Marjorie. Hi.
Well, I'm kind of new to Montessori. I only started, well, it's less than a year now, because I learned about it with my youngest, and I fell in love with it to the point where I'm doing the training. So I'm a Montessori guide in training. And so far everything
ahead of me. Yeah, go on.
Just a little. But yeah, everything lines up from what I understand. From what I've been learning, it is like independence is like that big key word. Letting the child succeed and try and even not succeed and learn from that, and just keeping hands busy and learning with hands-on experience. It seems to line up with what I've been learning so far and what I've been loving so far.
Yay. That is very validating to hear. Thank you. So, okay, it's like there's resonance. It's not like a totally different, language that we're speaking. And yeah, I agree. Those are some of the things that really excite me too, as a total neophyte to the actual like Montessori method as applied to children, because I'm really coming at this top down from having worked with a lot of adults, and it's a very interesting perspective to be kind of like reverse engineering healthy adult psychology and realizing, wait a minute, Montessori, like she knew, like she was telling us, how to sow the right seeds and like how to water them and nurture them. But I don't think we ever fully got it, at least no one I've met to date. I had like fully the kind of nurture that I think is possible that would like empower us to really hit the ground running as adults. So yeah, no, thank you for that. And then Beth. Hi, Beth.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks for being here.
I have been a Montessori teacher for about 20 plus years. I think it's amazing to watch the children transform when they first come in at that 3-year-old age, to watch them as they're learning and as they're growing and they're getting interested in all the material that's there for them, and how the learning comes about, and it's self-directed as well. I also am a parent of 4 children who have passed through the Montessori, so I get to see it from both spectrums. So I watch my children go through the course, and I see as young adults where they are today, and I see how the Montessori has really laid a foundation for their education, as they grow.
Yeah. So great to hear, and especially from someone with so much more on the ground experience that, like the dots are connecting and it's really bearing out. Very cool. And thanks so much for being here, Beth.
Thank you.
And Gabriella. Of course. Yeah. Gabriella, can you unmute if you can hear me? So just since I know there are some occasional technical difficulties. Oh, there, I see you, Gabriella. Do you want to unmute? Or we can always just circle back. Let's see if I can help with unmuting. Oops. Okay, so I'm not hearing Gabriella just yet. I'm just gonna kind of let you play with the mic settings for a minute, Gabriella, while I go to Sarah.
There are 3 dots up in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. If you click on them, it says unpin, unmute, and full screen. You can unmute there.
Oh, thank you. So then,
Okay.
Yeah, Gabriella, is that working? Yeah. Oh, yes. Hi, Sarah. In the meantime.
Hi. So I have 20 plus years in Montessori upper elementary. Before that, I started out my teaching career way back in 1998 as a middle school English and reading teacher, and then found Montessori after that. Upper elementary this whole time, but my daughter is entering middle school, and with the pandemic, I started homeschooling. So now I'm homeschooling this year and next, and a lower elementary and upper elementary, and now my middle schooler. So I'm trying to figure out, this definitely looks like where I want her to go and where she's been heading, and where all of my upper elementary students have been heading. But for me, this is new territory. So I'm here to learn.
Cool. Thank you. And I'm really excited for us to learn from each other, because clearly, like, you've had the immersive experience that that I'm only just starting to, kind of dip my toes in. And yeah, really excited to kind of think together about how to really flesh this out. Laura? Oh, Cecilia,
Hi.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Laura. One sec, because I see Cecilia says she has to leave. Was she on the stage and I did I not get to you, Cecilia? I've now lost all track because it's such a nice long panel now. Sorry, guys, I'm clearly still mastering the technology. I think she may have actually had to head out already. Sorry. So Laura, back over to you.
Hi. Sorry, I had some technical issues there, and I'm not sure what the question is.
Oh, sure, no problem. The question really is just in terms of generally reflecting on these 3 legs of the stool that I've articulated, how they resonate or don't resonate with your own experience as a Montessori expert, educator, parent, stakeholder, and just kind of relating them to any of your own experiences or kind of perspective on what Montessori is going for.
It makes sense to me that, and I think ideally the child is coming into middle school already with a solid basis through, lower elementary and upper elementary, with this kind of work being implicit in what they're doing. It maybe not as explicit as you might make it later on.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
totally agreed. I think if we, not to take any credit, right? If Montessori educators, parents in the kid's life have really kind of done things right, and set things up really well, at least the first 2 legs should be in place implicitly, right? And in a way, the 3rd leg is about making it all more explicit and sort of giving the teen more of that kind of operational control over the maintenance and upkeep and updating of the first 2. I think part of what we have to keep in mind is a lot of teens won't have had a consistent kind of Montessori upbringing, right? And so certainly coming into ATI, I know that we've got kids from all prior kind of walks of life. Kids coming in from public school, from other private schools, kids who sort of haven't done well in other, like, either more structured or, on the other hand, more progressive environments. And so we really can't assume anything about a kid's prior internalization of these mindsets. And I think that's going to be both part of the opportunity and the challenge, that wherever they're at, we're going to want to try to work with them and try to kind of instill the motivation and the growth mindset and kind of the perspective that they can be self-creators, as I've come to think of it. So I think we've gotten kind of through our current set of panelists. So definitely at any point, you guys are more than welcome to come join me on the stage, and I'll try to see that and involve you in the conversation. So meanwhile, I do want to preview for you guys some of the nuts and bolts as I'm currently developing them, and give you a chance to kind of try some of it out and get into the weeds and just like feel for yourselves how some of these tools, some of these strategies might work or not work, and give me input on your takes on these things. So this is both going to be grossly incomplete, relative to the really large kind of comprehensive toolkit that we're developing. And in some ways, probably more particular than the very individualized, very customized version of the coaching experience that any given teen is going to get, right? So there are going to be elements here that might never come up for a given teen, or they might already be kind of so embedded in that teen's mode of operating that it wouldn't be helpful or motivating to fuss over it and provide worksheets, and some teens may never look at a worksheet because that's just not how they learn, right? So the same principles of pedagogy apply here, that these are going to be principles and heuristics that we are going to take with us to our careful observation and curiosity about the individual teen. And then we're going to really co-create with them a coaching approach that serves these aims for that individual student. So with that all said, I think this is some scaffolding that we'll want to have in place and want to sort of be ready to provide to a given teen in order to foster that kind of self-creation, that power of self-management and sort of self-oversight, self-coaching that is going to be so critical. Basically, it kind of breaks down into these two broad categories. There's the self-awareness training, which we can think of as the kids or the teen's own equivalent of the careful observation we do, right, as Montessori guides, parents, teachers. And this is really going to set them up for then being able to understand, manage, change, if necessary, their own internal psychology as they move through the world. So this includes things like observing and describing their own physical sensations, their own feelings, thoughts, actions, action habits, the loops, the kind of iterative feeling, thought, action loops that they cycle through in different situations where, they think a certain way and that makes them kind of react a certain way. And then people react to them in an impatient, way, or people get either annoyed or they get critical feedback that then leads them to feel kind of even more, frustrated or attacked or insecure, which then leads them to behave kind of even more impulsively or reactively, right? So kind of noticing those patterns and how those patterns are showing up in different parts of their lives. And also the underlying kind of attitudes and mindsets that explain a lot of the different ways that they feel and think and respond in different situations. So starting to kind of notice those underlying kind of patterns, and also articulating their values at the level of why am I motivated to do some of the things that I freely and excitedly do, and why am I not motivated or not energized to do other things? Is it that I tend to come alive when I am competing with other kids, or when I'm doing something with my hands, or when I get to kind of work my kind of artistic muscles? And how do I then leverage that information about myself to make things more interesting to me if they're not already interesting, but if I see that they're important, and that kind of thing. So then that gets us to the self-regulation training, which is completely interpenetrated, of course, with the self-awareness training, right? Because these things are always going to go hand in hand. But this really gets at the stage where you as the teen are guiding yourself on how you want to be, the choices you want to make, even the mindsets that you want to adopt and practice and internalize over time. And in particular, in this coaching program, what we're going to be trying to inspire and trying to activate in the teens and then help them activate in themselves is what I'm calling for shorthand the Montessori mindset, right? The one that I sort of summarized with those 3 legs on the previous slide, kind of self-respecting, reality-oriented, growth, mastery-oriented, right? Agential, taking ownership. So really embodying in your self-talk and in the way that you observe and attend to and empathize with yourself, that kind of lovingly responsible approach to your own life. And then going from values to goals to action plans and executing those plans and understanding why they don't end up executing, on the plans that they originally made and what went wrong, and troubleshooting that. And in a nutshell, kind of going through the process of like consciously deciding what to do, doing it, learning from it, rinsing and repeating. So that kind of is a really still high level overview of the set of tasks that we would be helping teens learn how to do. And what I now want to do is just preview for you guys, because there's no way, we're going to cover the kind of comprehensive set of techniques and optional kind of strategies, processes, worksheets involved in each of these stages, where I'm drawing on a lot of different tools from clinical psychology, from cognitive behavioral therapy, from coaching methodologies that already exist, from just a lot of different places. But I just want to give you guys a few examples that I think are fun to kind of engage with and relate to. And I want to hear your inputs and kind of how you might experience these yourselves. And then hopefully we'll have a little time to kind of just like try out like the whole kind of soup to nuts, like skeletal kind of preview of how you might go through this whole process for yourself in a situation. So example one, really early in the kind of coaching process would be just like tuning the teen to their own like physical sensations, to their senses, to the things that they hear, smell, see, the way that they feel when they're breathing. And one of the ways that we do that is through various mindfulness exercises, one being a really fun one to do with teens. I often start with this one because I think it really like creates a lot of motivation early on, which is mindful eating, especially if it's with chocolate or something that is, tasty and like a little bit decadent. And really, really, really slowing it down, like to an almost excruciating degree. So before you even touch the wrapped Hershey's Kiss on your desk, you look at it, you kind of examine it from all angles, you notice the shininess, on the silver wrapper, and you notice how, the kind of texture and the angle of the little thing sticking out of it. And then slowly, you unwrap it and you notice the scent that's already kind of coming at you. You notice how inside, like you might start to feel yourself, like your mouth is watering and you feel kind of like that urge to pop it in your mouth, and notice what it's like to not do that yet, right? One of my favorite moments in coaching a teen in a kind of different context when kind of doing this activity was I put 2 Hershey's Kisses on every kid's desk, for them to try. This was in a group setting. And this particular kid, who's one of my favorite clients of all time, he ate the first one before even hearing the instructions. And then I kind of really, really hit pause before he can touch the second one. I said, okay, so this is a good experience. See how that's how we normally eat, right? We don't even really think about it. Like, we don't think what we're doing. Like, how much do you think you really got to taste and enjoy that Hershey's Kiss? I don't know. I mean, it was fine. Okay, so we're going to slow it down for the second one and like really like make it like you've never eaten chocolate before, right? So halfway into the exercise, he was mad at me. He was like physically kind of fuming and just looked really, the Hershey's like melting in his hand, and you can kind of like, see the chocolate kind of getting all kind of gooey, and he's hungry. He clearly like has not eaten in a while that day. He's getting really mad, and I just leaned and I was like, so what is it like? Like you're angry at me right now. What are you feeling? Like my chest is tight and my heart is beating, and I'm getting hot and sweaty, and it's really hard. I said, yeah, wow, you notice all those things, and do you see how you're not eating it? Like you can feel all that and still make a choice to not eat it, right? And this is just a demonstration of how actually the whole stack of all those mindsets and all those agential powers that we're trying to instill, like in a way, they're all contained in this one little exercise, right? This became his favorite mindfulness exercise, by the way, and for weeks afterward, he kept referring back to mindful eating and used it for every meal thereafter for a number of weeks. It was just actually really a pleasure to kind of see him embrace it. So quick thoughts, reactions, just to this one exercise, kind of as we're zooming in. What would it be like, imagine eating your next meal this way, or imagine, think back to what's the very last thing you ate today, and like, how much can you remember of its texture, scent, how it felt when you first bit in, how the flavors changed on your tongue. We have some questions. So how do you make sure the students can get guidance on the complex knowledge and skills that they desire? That's a great question. That is, I think, a big part of what ATI as a curriculum, and as a multifaceted program is trying to solve. And part of the answer to that is that there is a lot of content learning that happens as part of the curriculum. There are foundation courses that students have to take in order to unlock certain electives. And so that's kind of part of that integration of the agency and the knowledge pieces, right? That at ATI, there's this perspective, and I think in Montessori, there's this perspective that agency doesn't just mean willy-nilly do what you want. You can just, if you want, you can just learn, you can just like skip straight to calculus, don't worry about algebra. Like, well, you're not going to understand it if you haven't had algebra. Like there are actually, in the world, there are real kind of layers of complexity that in order to be able to understand and process some of the more complex knowledge, there are building blocks that you need. And so we try to really kind of scaffold the learning process by providing those building blocks in a way where the student is able to see the rationale for needing, to kind of take certain courses before certain others. And then as they start to develop that kind of metacognitive capacity of understanding kind of how well do I currently understand this? And what am I going to need? Like, what are the questions? What are the holes that I need to fill in my understanding in order to kind of be able to get to the next stage? That's where, with the help of coaching, they are now becoming more and more their own self-regulators with respect to the learning process. But, it's hard. It's definitely not a simple task. And then there was a question about, could there be a stool turned upside down as an addition symbolizing the community aspect? That is a really neat idea and might just be something that we incorporate. And I'd love to hear more. So Monica, I don't know if by any chance you'd be able to come to the stage. Actually, wait, do I have people I don't see right now in the moderation panel? Doesn't look like it. Looks like everybody is either on stage or off. But if Monica, if you're there, I'd love to kind of just hear more about the vision. And in the meantime, any reactions to mindful eating? Like, what do you guys think about this? Could you imagine doing it with teens and how it would go? Oh, yes, we have Monica. Hey, Monica.
Hi. I was just wondering whether this stool model, what you shared, could be extended with another stool, like turning it upside down and symbolizing the community aspect. Like the adolescent is part of the community, like the adolescent community, and also one leg of the other stool could be the society and extended. I don't know.
I really like that. Yeah. Yeah, I'm really glad you're raising that and kind of brainstorming with me kind of how to represent it, because I think it's missing right now from this little, schematic and conceptualization. Like, I don't think that there's enough of an explicit fleshing out of the community and the interpersonal aspects of this scaffolding process, which is so crucial, right? And it's a really crucial component of the ATI program. You saw that there's community as a big part of, kind of the tripartite model of the school experience. But yeah, I mean, win-win relationships and kind of the ability to learn from each other and to both assert yourself and to listen actively and to be able to really like reap the full value from your interpersonal interactions, right? And also just like the ways that these values exist within the community and how that reinforces kind of individual striving and learning. I think it's just so critical, and definitely it needs a lot more attention, you know, in this model. So yeah, no, thank you so much for raising that.
I was also wondering whether these surfaces of the stools, if we imagine that there would be another stool, how would they hold each other? Like the self is holding the community, or vice versa, and which one is down and up? I don't know, just a philosophical question.
It's a really good question. So I think that's something that is probably, you know, toward the end, I kind of comment a bit on what are some of the differentiating. So I think someone may need to mute. Let me see if I can. There, okay. Sorry, Sarah, just had some background noise, so that's why I muted you. But feel free to come back at this point. So yeah, later I kind of point out some ways that this is a distinct coaching approach. I think partly because we're really taking, like, we're leaning into the Montessori vision of the fully flourishing human. And I think part of that is there is probably more emphasis on sort of the individual agency and the private kind of work and understanding of the child turned teen turned adult. But I think that it's really crucial to also understand how that exists and is massively sort of catalyzed and empowered by the community in which the child, teen, adult, you know, finds themselves, right? And the ways in which, I mean, all of this insight that I'm now bringing to bear on the development of this coaching approach, I got from, you know, the giants that came before me, on whose shoulders I stand. But not just that, but also just from the kind of the inspiration and the collaborative and idea exchange that I've been able to do with my kind of friends and colleagues and partner, co-parent, you know, all of whom are a lot more engaged in the Montessori method than I am, and just being able to kind of draw inspiration from them, being able to draw on their relative strengths. You know, it's just really, I think there's still work to do in really kind of thinking about the kind of the ways in which independence goes hand in hand with interdependence or I guess interdependence, right? Which is different from dependence, I think. It's the kind of joint and kind of mutually catalyzing synthesis of perspectives and insights, and sort of how that fits and is sort of further empowered by a perspective on the individual child as efficacious and worthy in themselves, right? So yeah, so much to think about here, and I'm really glad you guys are raising those questions, and I definitely invite kind of further thoughts and insights, and maybe when we look at some of the other building blocks, maybe we can think about how they apply particularly in an interpersonal community context. So I want to go on and just show you guys a couple more of the sort of examples so that we have a little time left over to react and to kind of process. Great to hear that about kind of just, Laura, your thoughts on mindful eating. And so here, so I'm calling this level 4, which is completely arbitrary. It's just, you know, probably sometime later after doing some of the really basic kind of mindfulness exercises, we would be ready to kind of really take the plunge into identifying feelings. And this is just an example of a feeling wheel that kind of makes it a little more visual and provides a menu of first just like basic emotions in the middle, and then sort of being able to differentiate a little bit more, you know, based on like, well, what kind of anger is this, or what kind of sadness, you know, how intense, and sort of what are the textures or contours of that sadness? Is it more about feeling lonely? Is it more about, you know, feeling fragile or feeling guilty? And, you know, what else can you notice about the particular way that you feel? Just as an example of one way we might help teens to really like visualize and really engage with some of this introspection on the different dimensions of their feelings. You know, this is a worksheet that we're kind of going to be piloting with our teens that has a few prompts that they can kind of think about that they can represent in different ways to get at the different contours of their feelings. So, what's the emotion itself? You kind of can put the feeling word. Is there anything underneath that feeling? Which is a really useful prompt to start just sensitizing teens to the fact that A, there's more than one feeling a lot of the time, and B, there are often feelings that don't initially come to mind because they're kind of a little more vulnerable or a little bit more scary, right? And so we might not even want to name the feelings right away, but this kind of normalizes that, yeah, we all sometimes have feelings under our feelings. Maybe check for that. And then contextualizes the feeling of like, what happened such that you're feeling this way? But also like, what are you thinking such that you feel this way? What's happening in your body? What does it make you want to do? What does it look like, right? So just as an example of what a given teen might kind of represent, right, of their, say, anger feeling, right? They might pick a visual that really captures the feeling for them so that they don't just have to kind of rely on words, but can really paint a picture. It feels hot, right? My stomach hurts. Why am I angry? Because I am thinking that my friend was being unfair, my friend who was mean to me. What else is going on in the background that maybe could be relevant to how you're feeling? Well, my parents have been fighting, there's a pandemic, any number of things that might be kind of coloring the general emotional tenor of the kid's experience. Underneath, I also feel kind of sad, maybe scared of losing the friendship, maybe a little bit lonely and misunderstood because maybe the team was really counting on this friend to be there and the friend was sort of uncaring or seems to be kind of checked out, and that feels like a potentially really big loss. So as you guys so before we kind of get to the more advanced kind of compilation, any reactions, and if you want to just even give it a try, if you're having a feeling and you want to imagine kind of how you might use this sheet. Anybody want to just react or just like take us through a feeling that you have or had at some point, maybe in the last few days, or that you've heard a teen express? So for those who are in the moderation panel, whom I've called up before, you're staying here, and I actually am not sure if, but you guys can still see the chat, right? So you can let me know in the chat if you want to speak again, because I worry that I might not otherwise, catch you if you're raising your hand. I'm so used to Zoom, it's spoiled me with, just its little hand raising features and whatnot. Okay, so yeah, unless and asked for copies. So I'm happy to share, these slides. You're also about to see a link to a spreadsheet. In fact, if you scroll, can you see it? Yeah, at the top here, I'll actually resend it in the chat. This spreadsheet kind of has a bunch of prompts that put together a bunch of the things that I'm gonna show you guys. And I'll ask you to actually look at it in a minute anyway. So yeah, that you definitely have access to, but also happy to send the slides, just let me know. So you'll have another opportunity to reflect on feelings here in a minute. So I'm gonna go on in the interest of kind of covering some of the range here. So if we sort of fast forward to where we've learned and practiced with the teen a bunch of these granular individual skills, right? And you can really see, like, we're zooming in on just kind of the feeling row column, right? In that last exercise. For each of these columns, there's a whole bunch of particular practices and questions and observations and techniques that we can individually introduce and practice with a teen, depending on where the teen's at and what the teen's needs are, that then can become more practiced and more automatic, more part of the teen's working toolkit, so that then they're more and more capable of doing this kind of more complex self-reflection and put a lot of the pieces together. So imagining we're fasting forward now and we've done some of that. And so now we've got, let's say, this worksheet, which again, the worksheet isn't the important thing, right? It's being able to impart these techniques and practices to the teen in whatever format is going to work for them. But for the sake of our own visualization, let's imagine that we're kind of going through this with a teen, just as a kind of hypothetical made up example that combines a bunch of real life scenarios in an unrecognizable way, but just so you guys can kind of see what it might look like for a given student filling out this worksheet. Let's say we've got a student who is falling behind in her writing class at ATI after being the best writer and sort of being defined by what a great and eloquent writer she was at her old school, really prides herself on this. It kind of doesn't necessarily feel like she fits in or has other like more athletic or more like social skills to kind of recommend her. And so it feels like she's really put a lot of stock by being an articulate writer and really self-expressive. And now she's kind of struggling and getting feedback from her guide that is like, well, you didn't structure this well. I don't understand what you're saying. So what might she be feeling? She might notice some guilt, some shame. She might think things like, oh, this is kind of what her own internal voice is saying to her. Like, what's wrong with you? You thought you were so smart, but maybe you're just as lazy and stupid as those kids you hate, thinking of those like popular kids that seem to have it so easy. Maybe you're just like them, except minus the popular part. How is it saying this? So if she really kind of tunes in, not just to the like content of what the thoughts are saying, but also like, the tone of them. Like if we think of it as, okay, this is one of the like coaches or advisors in my head, like, how is this, what is the attitude that's coming across from this particular, feeling state? And she might notice that it's kind of mean and nasty. It's unforgiving, right? It's self-deprecating. It's kind of really not giving her much benefit of the doubt. And what does it make her want to do? Perhaps to stay up all night and try to force herself to write something so that at least she has something to show for herself, but in a way that's kind of maybe going to be really miserable and ruminative and, really kind of plagued by writer's block. There's a question I like to sometimes also pose, which is just like, which direction is it pulling you, this feeling? Like, is it pulling you towards something that you value and care about, even if it's to protect that thing or, to kind of make sure that some bad thing doesn't happen to the thing you care about? Or is it more about like just getting away from something painful or uncomfortable? And teens can get really good at kind of recognizing that actually as can adults, right? Which we don't necessarily notice right away in the wild, but we can kind of start to get sensitized to the different ways that it feels when we're mostly trying to kind of get away from emotional discomfort versus when there's like something in the world that's at stake and we're really trying to kind of protect it or advance it. Or at least that particular part of our emotional state, kind of where it's pulling us. And then sometimes I might also ask, like, what is the underlying mindset here? Like, what are some things you must believe in order to have these thoughts, right? Or that this part of you believes. Doesn't mean that it's all of her, right? She doesn't have to endorse these things. There's no judgment at this stage. There's no, implication that like she does or doesn't agree. She's just observing, just like a loving parent or a guide who's trying to understand a child who's upset, right? So she's sort of observing this part of herself and thinking like, what might be some assumptions under there? And she might notice, that there's a real kind of assumption that her worth is defined by this guide, right? And by the people who kind of comment on her work. And even if she doesn't see what's wrong with it, she's sort of feeling like, okay, well, she's just stripped away my identity by not liking what I've written. So, like, well, how does she know better than I guess I'm assuming that, she's wiser and older and knows, but like, aren't I ultimately the one who decides my worth? And also just this idea that if I am not doing a good job now, then I'll never be able to improve, right? That there's this kind of fixed mindset underneath, and kind of the idea that I can't achieve my goals. I can't get to the things that I want, and it's sort of on me. And by contrast, and I won't go through these box by box, but just as an example of some of the different shades of self-talk and kind of different mindsets that could come up here, you might also notice some anxiety, and there are kind of some subtle differences in both attitude, underlying assumptions, and motivational pulls. Often anxiety might pull you to avoid and to not confront certain things, but sometimes it might also be pulling you to kind of fight for the value that you feel is being threatened, right? So she might be tempted to kind of undervalue or even drop this writing class and like put more of her time into this internship that she just took on that will help her be a journalist, which is something that she really wants and has sort of defined herself by. And so there might actually be a mix of different kind of action urges and different motivations that are really useful to notice. On the other hand, she might also feel, and these are not mutually explicit, right? We can have all these things in us at once. She might feel some anger and some resentment, like, oh, why does this guide have to be making my life so difficult? These assignments are dumb. Why should I have to even do this? Why doesn't she get it? This isn't fair. And when she kind of reflects on on the tone, the attitude of that particular part of her, internal dialogue, maybe she finds like, no, it's really kind of earnest and really like there's something unfair that I actually want to flesh out here about, like maybe there's something that the guide isn't understanding. Or she might find this like kind of wishful thinking element of like, I wish I didn't have to work at this. And here, we're imagining that maybe that's the flavor that she finds that it has. So first, just quick kind of questions or reactions to this little worksheet and some of the prompts, maybe especially ones that you may not have encountered before, because some of these are like standard cognitive behavioral coaching and therapy. Some of these are invented by me by really drawing on and kind of synthesizing psychological tools and my understanding of Montessori. And I'm really curious how you guys, what your reactions are.
Can I say something?
So Sarah wrote, this makes me think of the no fault zone game. Interesting. That sounds like something that would be very compatible. It can be used alone or with others. Cool. I hope I can save this chat. That's something I should probably
say something?
look into. Self-coaching log looks amazing. Thank you, Laura. And I hope it'll make a huge difference. That is very much my hope. Other thoughts, questions, reactions. Oh, it looks like there's also something in the Q&A. Hi, Mike. How do you make sure the students can get guidance on the, oh, sorry. No, I saw that one also in the chat. So I think that one we talked about. So I think officially we have, is it 4 more minutes or is it 20 some more minutes? I think we have, I'm now kind of blanking on, when did we start? We started at 3:30 my time. So yes, we have 4 more minutes officially, I think, in our 45-minute session. So I'm just going to preview quickly a couple of the other pieces here. And then I know we're allowed to stay as long as we want. I also know that some of you may want to, continue on to whatever remaining parts of the conference or, other activities that you've got slated on the Saturday. So no pressure, but I'm happy to stay on and kind of explore these things more together and get more of your feedback if you're amenable. But in the meantime, just to kind of show you guys a few of the other examples on the self-regulation side. So level 1, and we've already kind of seen a little bit of this, right, in the identification of some of that self-talk in the first table. But once we've identified some of the different voices in our heads, we can really start to own the conscious, explicit ways that we respond to ourselves when we do recognize that we're feeling certain ways and that we're conflicted in certain ways, right? And this is where the kind of Montessori mindset becomes a real lodestone, I think, for us as coaches and hopefully also for the teens themselves, as they think about like, what is it that what kind of guide, what kind of coach do they want to be to themselves in all of these different situations? And then a much more sophisticated tool, just in the spirit of kind of showing you guys some of the things from across the range, is this decision-making exercise, which assumes a lot of prior context that we will have built up with the teen, where they've really learned to kind of notice and to check their own assumptions and some of their own self-deceptions and some of the ways that they might exaggerate or sort of underestimate certain risks, costs, and or rewards based on some of their kind of either preconceived notions or just, the ways that we can be short-sighted as human beings. And so this really incorporates a lot of that background and really gets teens to drill down and even kind of commit in number to what do they actually, honest to goodness, believe is going to be both the likelihood as well as kind of the importance of each of the pros and cons that are weighing into their decision if they're conflicted. Okay, so if we think about the teen in our example from a minute ago, maybe she's weighing whether to ask to switch to a different guide or to stay with this guide and have a conversation. There might be things like, at first it might feel like, okay, well, switching guides is just going to be the simpler solution. I should just hurry up and just get a fresh start. I'm not getting along with her. This isn't going well. Let me just, maybe the next one's better. But when she really, really sits down and asks herself the questions, it's like, what do I actually have to gain and lose here? The numbers come out very different. And actually this negative 2.8 is totally wrong. So I apologize. I think it should be something like 10 or no, 8. It should be 8 once I changed the example. So apologies for that misleading estimate there. But the idea is, if you really kind of ask yourself to commit to your own best estimate, your own kind of best judgment, and sometimes we can incorporate the exercise here. The book Scout Mindset, by the way, is such an awesome supplement to a lot of what I'm developing here. So I highly recommend it. Julia Galef's recent book, Scout Mindset. But just asking kind of, if you had to bet on the likelihood of each of these different outcomes, and if you were going to lose money or win money based on the accuracy of your guess, what would you actually like? Or would you swear to this in court under oath? Or, if you had a lie detector machine hooked up to you, to really get kids thinking in terms of really noticing, when am I in kind of what I call real, genuine, truth mode, and when am I in kind of pretend mode or wishful thinking mode. So I'm seeing the time, and I want to make sure anybody who has questions or comments or thoughts can kind of come up. So you guys are welcome to try this out on your own. This is the kind of the self-coaching part of that big the self-regulation part of the big self-coaching table that you have access to in Google Docs and are welcome to try to fill out. Just know if you're filling it out in the original shared doc, then people will be able to see it. So, if you want to share your responses, feel free to put them there. Otherwise, feel free to just make a copy of it for yourself. And meanwhile, so we can kind of skip through some of the example and just kind of end on, so feel free to try this on your own, but to just end on a few notes of summary and synthesis. A couple ways that the approach is different, which kind of touched on a little bit before. The commitment to a particular vision here, right, of the good life, which is the kind of Montessori mindset vision, that agency and the love of knowledge, the love of work, that these are ingredients of a good life for a human being, right, all else being equal, and that it's really important to experience and to sort of come to see for oneself how empowering these mindsets can be. And then this emphasis on the virtue of work, of doing the work, of really kind of taking ownership of your outcomes and the ways in which being reality oriented really fits into that. So just a kind of quick summary of some of the maybe more controversial or kind of stickier points that I'd love to get reactions to. And that's all I've got by way of formal workshop content. So like I said, thank you guys so much for coming, for all of the great questions and reactions and inputs already that you've shared. And I'm happy to stick around. So please don't hesitate to stay with me here and ask away if you have questions, or just give me your thoughts, which I'm greedily collecting and hopefully going to be incorporating into the next beta version of this coaching process.
So Gena,
is that Laura? Yes.
That's me.
Hi.
I'm curious to visualize this you envision being taught in a group.
Oh, great question. Yeah. So what I didn't show you guys, let me see if actually I have a hidden slide here somewhere. Don't look at all this nonsense that is just kind of hidden away from me to refer to, but there might just be a slide here on the timeline of coaching, which gives you a bit of a taste for how we're envisioning this. So we're going to actually start off the coaching sequence with a foundations of coaching class, which is very much going to be, you know, in a group format, and we're going to really try to take maximum advantage of the group format. It looks like I don't actually have it here anymore. Sorry, I'm just going to stop sharing this screen because it's not really that informative anymore, but I'm happy to share these slides with anybody. There, now I can see you better. So in the coaching foundations course, we're going to be very explicitly kind of catalyzing and co-creating these processes and understandings, and just like building excitement for coaching through group activities and through engagement with the group. We're also going to be, it's going to be very tightly integrated with the co-creation of community process and foundation. And so Laura, Dr. Mazur, who's here and is our VP of adolescent programs, will be able to speak to this much better, and probably has already gone off to man the ATI booth. So definitely feel free to kind of grill her more on the specifics. But the way I envision it, the kind of big picture, is that this is going to be part of the DNA of the whole program. And so every guide, I think the current plan is just about every guide will also be coaching some subset of students. And so guides know, guides are trained in this coaching process and methodology. Guides are working directly with a subset of students individually, and guides are also facilitating some of these same processes in their classes and in their community meetings and community engagement kind of activities. And so my hope is that all of the above will be happening in concert. And, you know, I didn't really even get to kind of the interpersonal modules of coaching, which include things like being vulnerable and win-win relationships, and kind of really thinking about the mutual kind of value and importance of openness and honesty in building the kind of trust and the kind of, you know, value exchange that actually makes for really intimate, rewarding relationships, and kind of how that all gets practiced in the form of assertive communication skills and reflective listening skills. So a lot of this is going to need to happen in a more interpersonal, kind of more communal context. But I think the one-on-one relationship will be a really crucial sort of anchor for a lot of that. And, you know, a place where you can even like talk about the ways you might not feel comfortable in the group, or talk about ways in which you're having trouble connecting to other students and so on.
Yeah, well, it's super exciting to me. When I'm listening to you, I'm beyond excited, but at the same time, kind of sad that most students probably will never get this. Like, it seems to me almost criminal that, like, you know, we have physical education, we have intellectual education, but we don't have this. And it's, to me, it's just as important as the other aspects. So I'm really impressed and excited.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, you're singing my song. I'm very, very much with you on all of those sentiments. But yes, also really excited and really happy to get this positive, enthusiastic response, and we're all in it together. So thank you, Laura. And is that, oh, and Laura, Dr. Mazur, Laura is here now. Did you want to weigh in?
Well, I was going to hop on and talk a little bit more about how coaching fits in the overall ATI program, but maybe I'll make sure there aren't any questions specifically for you first. And if anybody wants to talk more about what our coaching program looks like at the schools and how the coursework and the one-on-one coaching complement each other, once we wind down here, I'm going to be in the ATI Expo booth so we can talk details.
Thank you, Laura. Definitely depend on Laura's expertise and leadership and making all this happen. So, but, yeah, I guess she's officially left now, but yeah, she'll be in that booth if anybody has any questions about the larger ATI program that we're building. But yes, what other questions do you guys have, or just like thoughts, reactions? You know, if you've tried filling out any of these columns and what it brings up, or if parts of it are confusing, definitely looking for any and all input at this point. Monica, are you there?
Yes.
Hi.
I was just wondering how this connection with the community, this aspect of a little bit of sort of altruism fits into the self-centered coaching aspect. I mean, it should be the focus to focus on the self in a coaching situation, but are there any outlooks on the others in this coaching setting?
Definitely. Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm so glad you're bringing it up. So, I didn't really spend enough time even on that example. I mean, enough time, but there's no way we can do more than scrape the surface in this kind of short demo period. But I really want to kind of emphasize that many, if not most, of the particular conflicts and situations, triggers for difficult emotion that we're going to be workshopping together with the teens are going to have interpersonal elements, right? So even like the example I was just talking through, she's feeling kind of upset by the feedback she's getting from this guide. And probably some combination of things is going on where they're not quite on the same page. Maybe the guide hasn't fully empathized with and fully gotten to know this kind of teen and her relationship with writing and what it means to her. And like they need to get together and really kind of understand, see inside of each other's souls and get on the same page about kind of what both of them are bringing to the table in this relationship of, guide and student and connect. And a lot of what we would be helping the student to understand and grapple with is both what she values and wants out of that relationship and the barriers that are making it hard for her to go after those things, right? Like the kind of fear of vulnerability and rejection and failure, and really reorienting her in how she thinks about other people, like that other people are tremendous sources of information, but also inspiration and support, and that there's so much value she could reap by approaching this relationship in a certain way. And so I would say, and then kind of how to do that, like how to sort of open up a little bit more to her guide and how to express some of her misgivings rather than just, dropping the class or asking to switch, like really having a hard conversation where she says, look, I defined myself by like my ability as a writer. I like have it in my head that I'm going to be a journalist when I, grow up, and like I'm basically hearing you tell me that I suck at this. So I've been really upset. I like haven't slept the last few nights because it's really weighing on me. And imagine the conversation that now, the guide can have with the team where like she can really like kind of contextualize and build her up and point to some of the really inspiring aspects of the writing that she's read, and like really come to her side as a fellow human and as a mentor, right? And like how much that can unlock this teen's potential and just like energize her, right? So I would say, yeah, it's like really part and parcel of the approach, but you're right, it kind of doesn't come across in the way because of the really strong emphasis on the self aspect. So I'm very open to suggestions about how to really, which I'll be thinking hard about the kind of the second stool suggestion that you gave, and anything else that would can really make that come across more. Yeah, and thank you, Laura, also for your kind words. And sorry that, so I don't know if that means you're in or not now, but yes, I'm happy to send slides. I'll connect with the conference organizers about how to make sure you guys all get access to them. Let's see. So Monica, did I address the question?
And it's really interesting. I just quickly reflected on this idea of the other stool, and I came to that point. Maybe the third leg of the second stool could be like, it could be community, society, and maybe supernature. I don't know, or nature, something something
like
as a broader context, maybe.
Like nature as like the world as a whole, or?
Not necessarily. I mean, there is this context in Montessori theory, the supernature, and I'm sure Matt is, your husband is an expert on that.
I'll ask
so
him
I don't need to explain that. But
I rely on
as an idea, maybe, or the third leg could be the interdependent coexistence of community and society, and like people relying on each other. So I just think this aspect would be really an extension and a useful extension to that stool, which makes a lot of sense to me, this 3-legged stool. And
I see what you mean.
Okay, so that was just a final thought. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Jen. I'm writing these things down. I'm writing down to ask Matt about supernature, and also to really think about how to incorporate into my little stool, framework more explicitly. Like, what is the role of community? What is the role, even just of kind of local, school community and the larger community and the culture, right? Like, there's so many layers that we need to think about how they kind of fit in. So yeah, no, thank you so much for that, Monica.
Thank you. Bye.
And thanks for coming. Bye. And any other questions or comments? I'm just going to scroll through to make sure I haven't missed any new questions in the chat. Thank you, Jill, for, I agree. We have, all of us, a lot to learn from this, me included. I still learn every day from that set of prompts that I showed you guys. Let's see, any other, so if you guys, those who are still on, if you want to just go through the worksheet that I linked to, which I am happy to recopy the link again and share any tidbits of what you notice about like attitudes or mindsets that might show up for you in a given situation, or any kind of questions or reactions that come up when you just try it on your own. I think someone had mentioned this fits nicely with the self-reflection worksheet, oh my gosh, I've lost my word, workshop that happened before this one. And I agree, that was a really inspiring, I got to at least sit in on a portion of it, and just a lot of synthesis in terms of how we self-reflect on our own thoughts, feelings, and kind of skills, processes, whether as educators, as parents, and then just more widely, the general human, self-management tools that we are modeling as much as teaching, right? Just how these things all fit together. I don't see any new questions coming in, but I'm just going to give it a few minutes because I see there are still 9 of us in the room, and I want to make sure everybody does have an opportunity to reflect and then to circle back and ask any questions or just share any reactions. Hi, Sarah. I see your question now. Curious to hear how a coaching approach from the perspective of clinical psychometric. That's an excellent question. And to some extent, I have to plead ignorance because I haven't been formally trained in any of the coaching paradigms that I know exist within the professional coaching sphere. I've had some interaction with and done a little bit of self-education around some of the frameworks and some of the tools, and I've talked to some people who are themselves trained professional coaches. So, but my training, my starting point is very different, right? So I am coming at it from a clinical psychology perspective, and then I've realized increasingly that my interest is not in uniquely clinical problems, though certainly I have a lot of experience and background in treating anxiety, depression, ADHD, trauma, the kinds of things that come up clinically. But really, my interest is much more widely in empowering what I call self-creation and inspiring it in people in all walks of life, particularly people who are doing things that are ambitious or hard or just like new, people who are trying to chart new kind of territory, whether in their personal or professional lives. So I would say that there's probably actually a lot more overlap in where I've arrived in the adaptation of a lot of my therapeutic tools and frameworks to the coaching realm, and kind of what I've pulled from some of the coaching materials and experts that I've interacted with. And then there's probably going to be ways that my approach differs both from traditional clinical therapeutic approaches and traditional coaching approaches, kind of maybe in some of the ways I gestured at, that, you know, I'm really applying a lot of the tools and, you know, self-reflection skills and emotion regulation skills from the clinical kind of toolkit to this goal of really promoting agency and promoting the love of knowledge and the love of work. And I don't think that those meta values, if you will, are represented in much of the clinical literature. I don't think that there's nearly enough emphasis on really empowering people's agency and really inspiring them to take ownership of kind of their own learning process and like kind of bootstrap their self-confidence in action. I think that's something that's just really kind of undercooked, underdeveloped in the clinical realm. And I imagine there's more of that kind of material in the coaching. I'd actually love your take on it, Sarah, if you wanted to put in the chat or come on the stage and just speak to your own coaching background. But I imagine that it's also not that well fleshed out because this is really a kind of philosophical take that I'm bringing to the practical task of coaching that I really haven't seen integrated in quite this way. But I'd love to know what's out there that I can, you know, pull from and incorporate. Cool, the coaching habit. I will definitely check it out. Thank you, Sarah. Imagine the intermeshing. Yeah, exactly. Totally with you as far as kind of why particularly that kind of intermeshing might be really valuable, given both, you know, it's really hard to be a teen, as we can all probably remember. And there are just so many ways that you're both highly vulnerable, right, and highly malleable, right, in this transitional stage where, you know, your executive functions aren't entirely online yet, but you're thinking much more holistically and abstractly about your identity, about the meaning of life, about what you want to do, right? And it's just such, I mean, from a Montessori kind of perspective, it's such an incredible kind of sensitive period that can really make or break kind of how easy or hard certain things are going to be later in life, right? And so I think a lot of the clinical tools apply in spades to this period where, whether or not you meet a diagnosis, right, like or diagnostic criteria for, you know, clinical anxiety or depression or whatever, like your emotions are going to be volatile and you're not always going to be able to control your impulses. And at the same time, you have so much to learn from reflecting on your own psyche, right? And from learning how to bring some agency and intentionality to your own self-management. So yeah, no, I'm totally with you on that. Definitely going to check out that book. Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Anyone else with questions or reactions? Yeah, thank you for that. I feel really strongly about the universality of these tools and just generally have a kind of dimensional perspective on clinical diagnoses where I increasingly don't make bright line distinctions anyway between, you know, when someone is a person who's depressed versus a person who is feeling really down and is having, you know, is going through a slump but is really unmotivated and is having a hard time committing to a given goal or a given project. Like there's really, the research tells us at this point that there's really no bright lines in the sand, that these things exist on a continuum that's all true for almost every mental health disorder that, you know, we study and have classifications for, including schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, you know, ones that we kind of think of as like, oh, well, that's a brain disorder. And I'm going on a total tangent now, but just you got me riffing a little bit on this issue. I want to make sure that I'm not missing any questions or comments, reactions from those who are still sticking around. And thank you guys for sticking around. This has been such a fun and informative discussion for me. So thank you all for engaging and for all the input. We'll stick around for at least a few more minutes just to make sure that I give anybody the floor who would like to ask or follow up on anything. But I'll also put my email in the chat, and that way, if you want to take a little bit more time to just kind of chew on these concepts or work through that self-coaching log, and if you want to reach out at any point with follow-up questions or thoughts, feedback, suggestions, I welcome any and all input. All right. Looks like we are out of immediate questions, at least. And I'm going to definitely make sure to save this chat. So I'm just going to do a copy paste just for backup's sake. I really don't want to lose some of these helpful recommendations and inputs. And then if we don't have any other closing comments or questions, go ahead and dump all that into, ooh, that's cool. I got many of your lovely pictures together with my copy pasted chat text, so get to have a face to remember you by. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap us up. Thank you so much again, anybody who is still out there, still listening. I so appreciate your taking the time to engage in this co-creation of this new methodology with me. I'm really excited about the possibilities for just increased impact and resilience and just all the ways that we can carry forward Montessori's wisdom to improve the lives of our youth and ourselves. And I welcome any further questions, thoughts, feedback by email, or I guess you can also reach me in the people tab of the general event, at least until the conference is done later today. So in the meantime, I hope you're all having a wonderful conference. Thank you again for coming, and let's be in touch. Thank you all.